Hey, everybody, and welcome to week 9 of our course, where we will continue our discussion on economic growth. It was just this week I was continuing some work on a best practices manual, which is given to leadership of organizations or agencies of the state as they're newly appointed. A section of this best practices manual covered important economic variables. And the first variable I wrote that leadership should pay attention to is GDP. So keep in mind these concepts, these theories, these variables that we are learning about are very applicable as you finish school, jump into your career, and especially if your career leads you into a leadership position. Before we jump into the material this week, let's do a quick review of the equation that makes up GDP. GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus I. What those different letters represent are C, consumer expenditures, I, investment expenditures, G, government expenditures, plus exports minus imports of our given nation. With that quick review out of the way, let's first talk about what economic growth is. The book is going to define it like this: an increase in per capita GDP from one year to the next. If you recall from our lecture last week, we ended on discussing the limitations of GDP. And one of those limitations is it does not account for population growth or decline. To solve this, we look at the variable of per capita or per person GDP. It's simply calculated by taking our GDP for a given year and dividing it by our population. And to measure the growth, we take our per capita GDP from one year and compare it to the next. If we do this for the United States over time, what we see is overall an upward trend of growth throughout the years. However, you can also see a really clear and good example of the business cycle. A few of these events or shocks happened at the dot-com bubble burst, where you saw our economy go through a peak, a recession, a trough, and eventual expansion back into growth, until we reached another shock, the housing bubble burst, where again, a peak, a recession, a trough, and expansion and growth, all the way up until we got to this still occurring event of COVID, where I expect we'll see a recession, a trough, expansion, and growth. This is all fine and great to look at GDP and our growth over the short run, but how can we define or compare GDP over the long run? There's this really useful tool called the Rule of 70, where we just take all of those different years of growth and we average them out. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take that average over the long run and divide it by 70. And what this figure is going to give us in the end is how long it takes for a given economy to double. This is an especially useful tool when you're comparing a high growth economy to perhaps a developed economy like the United States. It's going to take a developed economy like what we have a lot longer to double than perhaps a developing economy. Later on in the lecture, we'll go over some of the attributes to help an undeveloped or growing economy become a developed economy? Before we jump into that, let's get into a few more details of that C plus I plus G plus X minus I and a few different factors affecting that growth. The first is labor productivity. And labor productivity is a measure of how much output per unit of labor is produced. Next is this idea of savings and a savings rate that the overall economy is saving as compared to that C, consuming or consumption expenditures. What affects this savings rate are two main variables. First is the given interest rate within our economy, which for the United States, because of the Fed funds rate, is going up. And as interest rates go up, we anticipate people will consume less and save more. Another big factor affecting the savings rate within our economy is consumer confidence. And consumer confidence is the outlook that you and I have cumulatively of our economy moving forward. If we're pretty confident things are going to be good and be in that expansion state of the business cycle, well, we're not going to save as much. We're going to spend our money and consume. However, if we have a negative look on the economy moving forward, our savings rate ought to go up as well so that we can prepare for that trough and the recession to come. Another big factor affecting GDP is technology. And our technology seems to go up and is encouraged the more an economy has patents. And as promised, a few of the attributes that we can expect to help an undeveloped economy become a developed economy are things like property rights, patents, the amount of education within an economy, and limiting protectionism within an economy. I would expect and think it would help you a lot with your final project if you take a look at each one of those variables within your economy, define it as an undeveloped, a growing or expanding or developed economy, and then prove that by going through the property rights, education, patents, and limited protectionism policy within a given economy. Those are going to be our main ideas in economic growth and global development this week. I hope that helps you as you read through the rest of the chapter material and dive right into your homework. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks.